Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you all today?
It's a lovely day. Good to see you.
It is very good to see you too, and both of you look extremely beautiful. I don't know where y'all are. Can I come over and get something to eat? Are y'all cooking today?
Not yet.
Well, good.
In fact, 9 o'clock in the morning, you probably didn't consult with me about the time. Because ordinarily I would be asleep.
Really?
I'll be in the kitchen cooking.
You be cooking. Okay. That's why I asked you if you cook. Can I come over and get a plate?
No, I haven't started yet.
Oh, okay.
Over.
Okay. So I want to say for the record, you are both my parents. Although you did not birth me, I claim both of you as my parents. So, no matter how often you all try to deny that, you are my parents. I consider you my family. So thank you all very much. So
you're an easy child to raise.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you, please, both, will you please share with us your name and anything you feel comfortable sharing about yourself in your life?
My name is Brenda Becton. I was born Brenda Brown, the 7th and youngest child of Leander and Wesley Brown. There's a 16-year difference between me and my oldest sibling. So I can't say we all grew up in the same household because by the time I started having memories, they were exiting the house.
Okay.
I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains. Was educated in Greensboro and came to Durham to pursue higher education. Durham is where I met my spouse, and beginning on Saturday, we would have been married for 50 years.
Congratulations, that's wonderful.
We've got 3 kids, 3 grandkids, and 1 great-grandchild. Professionally, I am a lawyer by training. I did not grow up with any aspirations to be a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers. And not quite sure how I ended up being a lawyer. I know my mother would have made a great one. And maybe she has some aspirations that she transferred to me kind of, I don't know, without ever speaking about that subject. Early days, I was born in 1948. So I grew up in segregated communities, although not really, because we always lived on the edge of the dividing line, where the black and the whites. So the communities I grew up in, while segregated, I could always kind of see over the fence to what was going on the other side. High school is a point at which I entered into an integrated community. And it was rough. That was back when we were integrating with all delivered speed, and the speed wasn't very deliberate. High school prepared me for college in the sense that I chose to go to a majority white college. And as I look back on that experience, I realized that of the 9 Afro-American students who were in my class, I'm probably the only one who came out of an integrated high school. And so my experiences or my reactions to what they were or what we were experiencing there, I think was different, because I'd already been through experiences that were more challenging and more overtly racist. So that's the early days. I went to college, I got a degree and couldn't get a job. So I went to law school and got a degree, and eventually became, worked in my concept of going to law school was to do some good out there. So I've always worked in the public sector, first with legal services, then with the state. That's it.
Thank you. I wrote some notes, so I have some follow-on questions, but we're going to speak to Professor Becton.
Good morning again. My name is Charles Becton. I'm a lawyer by training. I grew up in eastern North Carolina. I call both Morehead City, where I was born, and Ayden, where I went to grade school, hometowns, both in rural eastern North Carolina. I have 2 brothers, one 18 months older and one about 15 years younger. Mm-hmm. In different households, because when I was 4, I moved from Morehead to Ayden to live with my aunt. My older brother lived with a great aunt, and of course my younger brother was born 15 years later. I went to an all-Black school, grades 1 through 12, a union school. Had a next-door neighbor who had gone to Howard the year before I got there. I went up with her, I believe, to help her move in, and decided I liked Howard, and I applied to Howard and was admitted. Loved my experience at an HBCU. Left Howard and came to Duke. There are questions I guess you can ask me to talk about how that happened. Got my JD degree there, and later on I got a Master's of Law at the University of Virginia. During my more than 50 years now of legal career, I've worn many hats: a litigator, a trial lawyer, trying criminal, civil rights cases, police brutality cases, housing discrimination cases, all sorts of employment discrimination cases. I was an appellate court judge here in North Carolina for 9 years, from 1981 to 1990. During all the time I tried cases and was on the bench, I also taught law. I did not mention, I retired from the bench in 1990, went back into private practice, and was in private practice for another 20 years, trying civil cases, major tort cases, medical negligence cases, product liability cases, a varied legal career. I can't rank order those experiences. I enjoyed every one of them. When I was trying cases, there was just nothing better. Saving lives and restoring human hope was what I was all about. When I became a trial judge, an appellate court judge, nothing was better. Many judges enjoy reading all of the records and briefs, but I enjoyed the analysis, I enjoyed the writing, and during my almost 10 years on the bench, I authored more than 1,000 opinions. That does not include a bunch of dissenting opinions or concurrent opinions. In fact, I think I was called the dissenter when I first got to the court, because I was dissenting a lot. My trial teaching experience began within 4 or 5 years after I finished law school. And except for 2.5 years, I was chancellor, president of universities here in North Carolina. I've been teaching law since 1974. So basically, well, whatever the math shows that to be.
A minute or two.
Hmm?
A minute or two.
A minute or two. Again, I can't rank order them. I was telling you how much I enjoyed trying cases. I enjoyed my work on the bench just as well. And I certainly enjoyed teaching. In fact, again, I taught every year since '74 except for 2. What's most pleasing is that what my students have become, seeing them become good lawyers has been very gratifying.
So I want to say something about the two of you that I know. I have known both for maybe 10 years now. I don't know exactly how long, but for a long time. I met you, Professor Becton, at Duke Law when you were teaching there. And what I want to say, and I want everybody to know, and probably most people already know this, that the two of you are the most gracious and generous people that there are. You bring people into your home for dinners. You mentor, you advocate, you help young lawyers coming along. You are exceptionally wise in helping people do this. And as you have said, Becton, you've enjoyed all of the things that you have done. But I would say the thing that I can recognize is how much you contribute to the legal community and the Black community. And I can say the same thing for you, Brenda. Both of you are phenomenal people in your space, considering your lives, you know, how you started, you know, the experiences you had, you know, where they weren't people like you for you, you know, right? There weren't people to help you, and you have helped so many. And because of that, I am extremely proud and grateful that I know both of you. I am extremely grateful that you will allow me to connect you to someone and you will help them. And those qualities are not found in everyone. So I just want to thank you both for that.
It's our joy having met you. And thank you for those comments. I think it's fair to say that for both of us, law has been the vehicles through which we have sought to serve the public. Obviously, you help people as a lawyer. As a law professor, you groom students and mentor them. As a judge, one reason I went on the bench is because as a trial lawyer, for the most part, I was helping a litigant, a client. As an appellate court judge, by one decision, I could help a whole class of people, and that was rewarding. Brenda's public service life, and she can tell you, included not only legal services, but prisoner legal services. She said she couldn't find a job. She actually had a job when she went to law school. She was the first minority admissions counselor at Duke, admissions counselor at Duke. I sort of kind of kept talking about law school, and actually her mother did join in. We put the pressure on her from both sides. Went to law school and did a lot better than I ever did in law school.
Now, we know Brenda's brilliant, you know, because she,
without a doubt.
Yeah, she's the IT consultant in your home, you know, so, you know, when there's technology problems, we know that we can call the IT consultant over there and work whatever the issues are. So
let me drop a footnote to something she said earlier. She talked about the overt discrimination in high school, and she felt less of that at Duke because what she had been exposed to, that the other Black students at Duke, as far as she knows, had gone to all Black schools and they had not seen what she had experienced. She can tell you more about this, but I remember her telling me very early on that at her basically all white, there were just several Blacks at that school, high school, when she told her guidance counselor, a white male, that she was interested in going to Duke, he told her, you'll never make it at Duke. You need to go to Wingate. She said, where's Wingate? She went to Duke and finished in 3.5 years. Never did write that man back to tell him anything about it. And then,
no, I never did. And I never have been back to my high school. So.
Not even reunions or anything?
No, I've never been back. That was a chapter that for me, I needed to shut the door on and just move on.
Yeah. So let me ask both of you this question. So we won't talk about age, but based on the times in which you grew up and the places in which you grew up, what was it like? You know, so we can go back into a lot of the written literature out there, the scholarship out there that says, you know, what it was like to be Black in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. What were your experiences just being Black in your communities, in your education, in your experiences? Was it so much so that it was demeaning or emasculating or hurtful or discouraging? I mean, I don't know what the right adverb is, adjective is, but can you describe what it is to grow up in the times in which you grew up?
Well, as I think indicated in my opening statements, I didn't grow up in typical Black neighborhoods. There were not a lot of Black kids around me, except when I went to school, like in elementary and in junior high school. It's only when I got to school that I was surrounded by other Black children. But for me, and I didn't have a lot of Black friends because I didn't live in close proximity to other Black children. Mm-hmm. So the schools were the center of where I made the contacts. But I think I grew up being a very isolated, maybe individualized person. My closest friend was a book. And I would always be curled up with a book. So I don't know that I knew about discrimination and, all that stuff, even though I knew there were some white folks over there and they didn't speak, we didn't speak, but I didn't care. I was a kid. When I became aware is in junior high, they had a program where they were trying to accelerate education for what they call their brighter students. And when we were getting ready to go to high school, they didn't have a continuation of that. So all of us who were in these classes were kind of going to have to mark time for a year until everybody behind us caught up. And to me, that was ridiculous. So at that point, the city was letting those who wanted to go to white schools do so. And that's when I realized that if I went to the white school, I wouldn't have to mark time. I could, enroll in the courses that were the natural continuation of what I had been doing. But for me, the only thing that was bad about segregation was that it wasn't equal. I didn't mind being surrounded by Black folks all the time. I didn't have any desire to be a part of the white community. But that situation with my education really did bring home to me the unequalness of how Black people were being treated and how what advantages white people had.
So during any of that time, were you ever called the N-word, or were you ever treated or felt like you, like what I think you both know, I grew up in South Carolina, and I grew up in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. You know, we would hear black people called the N-word all the time, and grown men called boy, you know, and all that stuff. Did in Asheville or Greensboro, did you ever experience any of that?
I don't know whether or not my older siblings did, but I think my parents pretty much sheltered us from that kind of interaction. I wasn't around anybody who could call me that.
Ah, very good. Excellent.
I mean,
Books
I
don't
just,
talk back, I guess.
what?
Books don't talk back.
Well, no, books don't talk back. But I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, you know, my father was a minister. We had the church community, but there was no interaction with white folks. And I wasn't allowed to go downtown by myself. And when I went with mama, I mean, I guess nobody would call a child that. And I just don't remember any overt being called names until I got to high school.
Becton,
My experience is a little different. Growing up in rural eastern North Carolina, very segregated community, and I did not find this out while I was growing up, there was a sign welcoming people to Aden saying the KKK welcomes you, in a billboard to Aden. I must have been sheltered or was asked to turn the other way because I don't recall seeing that sign growing up. I have now seen it. I've copied photographs of it and talked to the people in Aden. I showed it to them what that community used to be like. While in, I guess, elementary school, I was asked by the principal one day to take some posters up to the post office. And to do so, I had to pass the white high school. And of course, occasionally I would pass by and people would haul out of the window the N-word, just because I was Black. I mean, they were far away and it was something in their heart. I mean, it's not they were hitting me. I also recall in Moorhead, when I got my first, quote, job, I'd always, from the time I was 7 or 8, headed shrimp for 2 cents a pound, peeled shrimp and gutted shrimp for 40 cents a pint. I picked cotton for 4 cents a pound when I was in Aden. I primed tobacco. But I got a job at Fleming's restaurant on Atlantic Beach. Mr. Fleming's said, "You want to work, boy?" And I said, "Yeah." And after a day's work, I said, "How much are you going to pay me?" He said, "Well, boy, I'll see what you work at the end of the week." I'm not sure that was as pejorative as I just made it sound, but it was clear he was in control. At the end of the week, he paid me $27.50 for a week's work.
Wow.
Now, that was a lot of money for me. I don't know why he didn't pay me $27 or $28. $27.50 was what he paid me. I got the better end of the deal because as a dishwasher and handyman around the restaurant, and I got there around 5 o'clock in the morning, I had the biggest breakfast any kid had ever had and the biggest lunch any kid had ever had. So he thought he was paying me $27.50, but he was probably paying me about $50 a week.
Absolutely. Excellent. So I want to go back to your education, specifically at Duke Law. And I just want to highlight one thing. So Brenda, how many other Black people had gone to Duke Law when you entered in Duke Law?
Not a whole lot. I don't know that I can count it. Becton has better memory of numbers. When I entered Duke Law, I was in a class with the first 3 Black women. I had actually been accepted the year before, and so I would have been in the class by myself if I had gone then. But I declined the acceptance because they wouldn't give me enough money to make it worth my while to try to figure out how to give up my job and go to law school. So there were 3 Black women in my class. I don't remember how many guys. Not a lot. There were, I think, 3 in the class before me. I'm not sure in the 3rd year class how many.
But it's fair to say that you were among the early Black students, Black women students to go to Duke Law.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as Black women, the class that I entered in, we were the 3 first. First time they'd had any Black women.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
The class that came in after me, I think, had more, and I mean, which is generally how things work. Although I think about Becton's experience, I mean, Duke didn't attract a lot of Black students.
Still don't.
In terms of law.
Still don't.
They still don't.
Go ahead.
No.
I was either the 5th or 6th Black, depending on how you count it. I was the only Black in my class in 1966. There were 2 Blacks who were 2 L's, James Hatcher, whom I knew when I was at Howard, and Clarence Ledbetter. And that was it, 3 of us in the entire school. Walter Johnson and David Robinson were the first 2 Blacks at Duke. They graduated in '64. Eric Mishaw, who transferred into Duke, graduated in '65.
You finished in 6.
That's 3. Hatcher, my roommate, graduated in '68. That's 4. And I graduated in '69. That's 5. But Ledbetter, who actually dropped out after my first year for a year, came back and ended up graduating with me. So that's why I say either 5 or 6 in my class.
And after you graduated, who came?
At no time at Duke was there more than 4 Blacks. There were no Blacks after me. And again, since Ledbetter left for years, there were only 2 of us during my 2nd year. 3 Blacks joined my last year, but of course Hatcher had gone. So those 3 Blacks plus me made 4. So there were more than 4 Blacks in any one class while I was there.
Were there any Black or brown faculty?
No.
What did you say?
I knew the answer to that question, but I just wanted to get it out there.
I'm trying to think when the first, at no time while I was at Duke was there anybody Black on the law school.
It was years afterwards before Jerome Cupp came.
Right. And
before Coleman came. Yeah.
Absolutely. So also during your experience at Duke, did you find yourself, well, first question, did you live in campus housing or did you live in your own house? Were there places for you to live on the campus, or was it not that?
Becton?
Yes. I came down to Duke and talked to Hatcher, and we had to find a room on Price Avenue, 2 blocks away from North Carolina Central University, because there was no housing on the Duke side of town. It was a 10 by 10 room, upstairs room, with a small heater in the middle. We called it a Seymour house because you could see outside, see more air than you could see wood. And in fact, when the hawk came through blowing in the winter, that little stove in the middle of the room would just go out. There were no desks to study at. We got on our beds and read our books on our bed. shared a bathroom with family members that was in the hallway. Just a very unpleasant living experience. The next year, when I was a 2L and Hatcher was a 3L, he came down during the summer looking for housing and couldn't find any on the Duke side of town. Then he and I both came down. We were both in DC at the time, came down during the summer, talked to realtors, talked to the people at Duke in the housing office, and they said there's just no housing over here for Blacks. And it was getting close to the reopening of school. We came down a third time, nothing available. Went to the Duke housing office and said, we have law students here at Duke. Classes start, I believe, in a week or two. You've got to find us a house. They said, we don't run an apartment. They said, we don't have one. We said, okay, we're going to sit right down here on the floor until you find us a house. We sat down in the housing office on the floor. It was the shortest sit-in in the history of the known universe. Within 15 or 20 minutes, not only did they find us an apartment, it was an apartment right behind East Campus. I could throw a rock and hit buildings on East Campus. Not only was it a spacious living room and a very spacious bedroom and a very spacious kitchen, but it had a patio that was 20 by 15. It had not one, but two rooftop decks for partying, among other things, for meetings. That house was such a great house, beautiful decor, beautifully laid out. Only had 1 or 3 apartments there. That later, the provost at Duke, I mean, many years later, maybe 15 years ago, the provost at Duke ended up buying that house and changed it into a home. I think maybe he still lives there. Gorgeous place. So claiming for weeks that they didn't have any, couldn't find any. It was only when we sat down and said we weren't going to move did they come up with housing.
Yeah. Brenda, is that your experience too? Did you find housing when you were in school, or were you and Becton married by then? You know, how
we were married, and I had when I finished Duke undergrad, as he mentioned, I became the minority admissions person in the undergraduate admissions office. So I had to find a place to live then. And we got married. And when I made the decision to go back to law school, we were actually in different cities. He was in Charlotte, I was in Durham. So I went back to the place that I had lived in while I worked at Duke. And then we got married and bought a house. So I didn't have those issues.
A mansion.
Not this one.
Okay. So let me ask you another question about your Duke experience. Were your white colleagues accepting and helpful as you went to school? So, you know, Boston Black Law Students Association exists. I don't know if that's always existed, but it exists. And so, you know, those Blacks, and there are tons of other affinity groups, but those groups kind of work together and are able to, you know, support each other when they aren't getting very much support from their white colleagues or the administration or that. Did y'all have success, you know, from the other students that were there and the administration to help you succeed in law school?
Let me start because I know the experiences that the Black undergraduates at Duke faced. I was only one in my class, no more than 3 of us my first year. I did not sense any overt racism at Duke, ever, in law school. But I would go on campus to eat in the union from time to time. I'd go to the dope shop, and I and Blacks alike would be waiting in line to pay for our goods or our food. And on more than 1 million occasions, the white wait person would call for the person behind us to come and pay for their food. And of course, we'd have to say, that's not going to happen. We were in line and we have money. I know of instances in which Black women were afraid to walk to Cameron Indoor Stadium for racial epithets and threats. I know of fights Blacks had with white students. The band played Dixie at the football games. It was more popular than Devil with the Blue Dress On, and at basketball games too. There was one Black member who refused to stand up when they played Dixie. Confederate flags were waved at the football stadium. I don't know if it was Wallace waved in, but Confederate flags were waved. And in fact, there was a photograph, and I no longer have it, of one of the Black students burning a small Confederate flag in the stadium. So we faced, as undergraduates, all sorts of problems. I'm talking about with grading, with comments from professors, you can't make it here. I'm surprised to see this from you. We're seeing their classmates' papers, which were worse than papers they submitted, got better grades. I did not sense that in law school at all, but there were other forms of subtle things that I realized. For example, I was not a part of a study group, and study groups in law school are very, very important, critically important. I recall one exam, a couple of my close friends who were white, and I talked about what might be on the exam, but I was never part of a study group. I never had access during my first year to outlines that were being passed around, an outline in property, for example. So those are the sorts of things on a subtle level that I didn't realize at the time were happening. I ought to recount one story that, because Bob Herendine and I still correspond almost weekly for the last several months. He's the first person I met when I got to law school. I came to Duke and went to the law school building 3 days before classes started just to look around and see what it looked like. And of course, I looked on the bulletin board and there was an assignment posted for 1Ls. I couldn't understand that, an assignment 3 days before class. But I went to the book exchange downtown in 5 Points, bought the books, went back to the law school library, went to the bottom basement, the third basement down there, you're aware of that, and ended up sitting down at a table where one white student was. We introduced ourselves, Bob Herendine from Boston, Charles Becton, Eastern North Carolina. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I just got the books. I got to read the assignments up." He said, "That's why I'm down here." And I read those cases for about 2 hours and looked up, he was still reading. I said, "Hey man, let's go read the sports page." He said, "Mm-mm." So I went upstairs and I read the sports page, came back down 15 minutes later, read for another 2 hours. And that's probably the longest stretch I'd ever read, except maybe when I was cramming. Mm-hmm. At the end of that second 2 hours, I said, "Man, let's go get a nap, let's go get a Coke." He said, "Mm-mm." He kept reading. I went upstairs and got some refreshments, came back down. I read another 2 hours, 6 hours. Never in my life have I had a book in front of my face for 6 straight hours. And finally, after 6 hours, I said, "Hey man, ain't you got to go to the bathroom?" Mm-hmm. He just started laughing. And he said, "Let's call it a day." But that experience taught me how much I needed to work and how hard I needed to work. And I attribute that to that meeting, that chance meeting with Bob Herendine. He became one of my closest, probably the closest friend I had in law school, and we still stay in touch to this day.
Brenda, did you have any experiences like that?
No, I mean, when I went to law school, I was married. I knew from Beck's experiences pretty much what I might face. There was no boss or anything. But the other 2 Black women, they were my support. We studied together. We crammed for exams together. I mean, I'm sure none of us would have made it without the others there. I mean, we were each other's support. And because I was married, and then because I had kids while I was in law school, I probably didn't have the typical law school experience because I went to class, but then I was out of there.
Yeah.
So, you know, the opportunity to engage with the white students was not really there that much for me because I went home, take care of kids, study when I could, etc. I do know that one of my first experiences in law school was the realization that the people that I was going to school with came from backgrounds so different from mine. I mean, I'm sitting in business law trying to figure out what a stock is, and they own them, you know. And just, you know, I realized that, okay, the conversations that they've been having over the dinner table are totally different from what we've been having. So I knew I was going to have to work hard, and that was not anything Becton had passed on when he helped talk me into going to law school. He did pass on his notes.
Excellent.
So I had those, and maybe made better use of them than he did.
Yeah, she got a 3.8 in property, and my grade was so low in property, you know. Actually, I could have passed on that experience because my classmates, I believe they ate corporations and business associations for breakfast. They had tax for lunch over the dinner table, and they had secure transactions at night at dinner. I spent my first 3 or 4 months in law school, either in Black's Law Dictionary trying to figure out what legal terms were, or because some of my professors decided they wanted to soar at 60,000 feet when I was at sea level, in Webster's Dictionary trying to figure out what they were saying. They would grandiloquently pontificate and expatiate on some universal or holistic theory and its preclusive significance in some doctrinal context. And I'm trying to figure out, can't you talk like regular people?
Plain English.
Yeah. And so that was all different. And as it turns out, an indirect way of discrimination, or at least disparate treatment,
right,
based on what my classmates had been exposed to and what I never knew about.
Excellent. So my last due question, can you tell me a little bit about the sit-in? So I have a copy of the sit-in newspaper that you did a couple of years ago remembering it. Can you tell us a little bit about the sit-in? Why was there a sit-in? What was the outcome of the sit-in? And, you know, how was it received by the university as a whole?
The first thing that happened was a study in President Knight's office because the university had not responded to some of our demands. In Brenda's entering class, there were 2 Black football players at Duke. Bill Turner was a walk-on, and I think Alan Parks was a walk-on too, because I think C.G. Newsom was the first Black scholarship football player. They were on the team, but during the spring, they were not allowed to join the team for the spring banquet because the spring football banquet was always held at the segregated Hope Valley Country Club. So you have people who played or practiced with them all year long, and the team decided to continue to hold their annual banquet at a segregated facility. So the Black students picketed Hope Valley Country Club. I was a line monitor, and the Black students were walking in front of the place, and Brenda was one of the students walking. That's how we met, picketing Hope Valley Country Club. We came back to school after that, presented demands to the president. Nothing had changed. So in the fall of '67, I guess that would have been, the students with book bags went to the president's office and sat down on the floor. And there are scores of pictures of that. There were 3 graduate students. Actually, Ledbetter was there, I was there, and Hatcher. We were the 3 graduate students and a host of undergraduate students. The next year, there was another protest movement, and I don't know if that's the time we walked to President Knight's house or not. I know we walked there in the winter of '69. That was when our demands still had not been met. And after Stokely Carmichael had come, no, after Dick Gregory had come to Duke, I actually introduced Dick Gregory in Cameron Indoor Stadium because the Page Auditorium was too small. And he spoke to the Black students. We told him we were thinking about a protest action. And 4 or 5 days after he left, the Black students took over Allen Building. And Brenda can tell you more about this, but my place at Markham House on Markham Street, right behind Duke campus, the one they found for me, became the off-campus meeting place for Black students. And in fact, several Black students actually spent the night at my place because we boarded a U-Haul truck at my place and went over down Chapel Drive to the Allen Building and jumped out and went in the building. We were there, we got in at 8 o'clock as we planned to do at the time that the vault for records opened and the bursar's office were open. And we occupied the building until it became clear with National Guard and State Highway Patrol and policemen coming up with guns and baronets, batons that we needed to get out. Brenda, can you add to that?
Not really. I mean, I think it was probably around, 3 or 4 in the evening when we left. We left the building, and by the time we left, there were white students who had congregated all around the front of the building. And when the police came, they encountered the white students. They didn't know that we weren't in the building.
We went out the back door.
And it was the white students who actually were on the receiving end of all that ammunition and whatever that
Tear gas
that they let loose, and we managed to escape. Afterwards, the Black students were, some of them were identified as having been in Allen Building, and they were being prosecuted under the pickets and protests policy. And so all of the Black students at Duke signed a petition or something that said we're all in that building, and if you're going to prosecute one, you're going to have to prosecute us all. And so they did prosecute us all. Trial was at the law school.
But the strategy worked. We figured that if they were going to throw one Black out, only 17 people had been identified. And every Black student on campus signed that petition that they couldn't throw one out without throwing everybody out. And Duke could not afford to throw everybody out. So we were placed on probation and promised not to violate the picketing policies again. By the way, I was only graduate student in the building. This was March, so I was, February actually, so I was 3 months away from graduation. And of course, in May of that year, I got a letter from the State Bar Credentialing Committee saying, we understood you took over the building at Duke, period. Please come and defend yourself, period. That was basically what the letter said. And I went. But fortunately, I was armed with two wonderful letters. One from Dean Pye. Ken Pye was a dean at the time. And the other was from beloved Professor Robinson Everett. Just wonderful letters of support, talking about my integrity and everything else. And my closing argument, which must be the best one I've ever made, and those letters allowed me to take the bar exam.
I've never known Dean Pye, but I did know Everett, and he is absolutely a very, very wonderful man. So that's very
yes.
okay. So I'm going to leave Duke alone. We picked on them enough for today. I want to ask more about your career. So I think both of you have said you've done private practice. In your work, and I want to tell you of something that Judge Webster had told me, and I know you both know Judge Webster. He said when he first began to practice law, they were always questioning his credentials, like, was he really a lawyer? He was often challenged as being who he was when he was practicing, and even when he became, other, like a judge and other things, he was often questioned. Did you experience that?
Actually, I did not practice in private practice, but I think to the extent that never in my practice, but when I was teaching, I often got challenged by the white students about things that they would not challenge, I think, a white professor about. And somehow or another, the conversation devolved into, well, where did I get my degree? And I told them Duke. And then they were like, oh, well, maybe we better shut up. So, I mean, it just, yeah. I mean, but that was the only time. I mean, the discrimination or challenges that I faced as a administrative law judge or as a deputy commissioner at the workers' comp had to do more with my being a woman than my being Black, actually. I mean, I had one lawyer who was questioning a claimant about why she wasn't home instead of out there being on a job where she could get injured. And so afterwards, I asked him, I said, that seems like a rather interesting tack to take when you are trying a case in front of a woman. And he said, well, maybe, but you should be home too. So, that was more my being a woman than being Black was an issue.
Becton?
I did practice law, and there are many instances in which discrimination reared its ugly head. One of the instances involved the first time I was in Superior Court. This was just a plea my client had appealed a district court. I didn't represent him. He then appealed the district court verdict against him and came to me to represent him in Superior Court and told me when the court date was. And I went down to the court the Friday before the Monday. And because his case was not on the calendar. And I talked to the district attorney and says, my client said he's supposed to be in court Monday, but the case is not on the calendar. And of course, this attorney said, well, if it's not on the calendar, I can't call it. Mm-hmm. So my client didn't show up Monday. On Tuesday, a capias had been issued for his arrest because he had been called and failed. So I went down to the court with my client to say, Judge, my client is here. I don't understand why he's here because I came down to the court on Friday. He said, shut up, I don't need to hear from you. I need to hear from your client. Why, Mr. Defendant, why weren't you here yesterday? You know you're supposed to be in court. And I tried to butt in the judge. It wasn't on the calendar. And I talked to the district attorney. This attorney didn't say a word. The judge told me, I told you, I don't want to hear from you. And I'm not even paraphrasing him. He said, there are more clients in jail from taking bad advice from lawyers than there are dead people in Boot Hill for bad medicine from doctors. He says, in fact, you defendant, you come back here every day till your case is called, and you lawyer, you come back with him. My client, we came back that Wednesday, came back that Thursday morning, and this attorney finally whispered, look, send him home. I said, well, thank you, because he's about to lose his job. And I can't sit around here in court all day long to call a case that went on the calendar. It had been added to an add-on calendar. No one told us, and that's why he didn't show up. But that was my first time, and this was, I'd only been with the firm for a couple of weeks that I'd been in Superior Court. But there were other instances. I mean, I joined a firm in which Chambers' car had been firebombed, his house had been firebombed, and less than 6 months after I was there, our office was torched, burned to the ground. In February, ice on the ground. And so we walked through the building at 4 o'clock in the morning with water from fire hoses that was freezing as we walked through trying to salvage files. So I faced that sort of discrimination. I know of instances in which one of my white partners, Adam Stein, was asked by one of the trial judges, what are you doing in court on a case with that N-word? One of my Black partners, for example. I was not in the court at that time, but everybody told me what happened that day. I tried a case in a Piedmont County, South Piedmont County, in which my client, a 22-year-old Black policeman who'd only been on a job for 4 or 5 weeks, shot and killed the businessman in town. He owned a restaurant, basically a drive-through restaurant at the time. And my client got the job mainly because he was popular in the town. He had been the first Black quarterback at the all-white high school. And so he got the job without any training. He went to work. And as I say, about 4 weeks into his job, about 11 o'clock at night, actually 11:30, kids were racing up and down the street, leaving this restaurant owned by this businessman and drag racing down the street. He drove up to the drive-through and said, look, you kids, and he knew them because he played football with them, go home. You know there's a curfew. You can't be out after 11 p.m. And he'd go away, and the kids would go away, but as soon as he turned his back, they were drag racing again. He came back again, ordered them off, but this time the owner came out saying, what are you doing ordering people off my property? These are my customers. And he said to the owner, well, you know there's a curfew. I'm just trying to enforce the law. They should not be out after 11 p.m. The owner and my client got into an argument, heated argument. In fact, my client had to pull his gun to say, back off. At this point, the business owner and my client had a cigar in his mouth, slapped the cigar out of his mouth, and the gun went off, killed him dead. We had to try that case. We found out during the course of the trial that not only was he one of the biggest business people in town, but he was also, we were told, the grand dragon of the local KKK. And during that trial, the trial judge got threats saying, if this man gets off, nobody's leaving the town alive, not you, not the client, not the lawyers. We actually got calls in our hotel room, but that would just be groaning and nobody would say anything and we'd hang up. I was too young to be scared. Our paralegal, we found out, was sleeping in the bathtub. So we actually sent her back to Charlotte as we continued to try the case. It was pretty clear that we were winning the case. And on the night that the jury went out, the trial judge, who, by the way, had put his gun on the bench while the case was going on because of the threats being made, called the State Bureau of Investigation, because I don't think they have Department of Control, and had ordered 23 state highway patrolmen to come to the court. As it turned out, only 14 state highway patrolmen ended up there. The rest had to go to Wilmington because of unrest in Wilmington. Those 14 state highway patrolmen and some local law enforcement officials were in the courtroom when the jury came back in. Before the verdict was announced, and the judge must have had some inclination from the deputies because overhearing what was in the verdict, he knew what the verdict was going to be, we didn't. The judge said that when this verdict comes back, nobody is to leave this courtroom for 5 minutes. Nobody. And that's why these are highway patrolmen around the ring. The jury came back with a not guilty verdict. A black rookie policeman with no experience killing a reputed grand dragon. And the judge then said, now the defendant and his lawyers can leave. We left and the judge had arranged for us to have a state highway patrol escort. One car in front of us, one car behind us. And he arranged for us to drive to Raleigh, not to Charlotte, because he figured we might be ambushed on the way to Charlotte. He had set up hotel rooms for us in Raleigh. We got a highway patrol escort through 2 counties, the county we were in and the adjoining county, because that's where the business owners, people lived, at 70 miles per hour, single lane roads, just flying down the road. I did not find out until 20 or 30 years later when I went into a restaurant here in Durham and heard somebody there was talking about the city where the case was tried. I said, oh, I was there, I tried that case involving John Chambers. He said, you did? Yeah, I remember you. I was on the police force. He said, and I remember y'all flying out of town, but the judge had something else set up. The fire alarm rang and all the fire trucks ran west toward Charlotte, and all the city policemen ran behind the fire truck so that people thought y'all were going to Charlotte when in fact he was sending us to Raleigh. I didn't find that out until some time later. I should have mentioned the threats were real because at the bail hearing, before trial obviously, when my client was being escorted from the jail to the courthouse for the bail hearing, he was attacked by some of the deceased's family members. While deputies were carrying him to the courtroom, he was attacked. So the threats were real. But again, I was young, and in fact, I'd been out of law school about 2 years, less than 2 years.
I mean, I have to tell you, and one of the reasons why I hate doing these chats is they are so painful to hear these kinds of stories. And people yesterday I spoke to a woman from Alabama, and when I finished talking to her, I had to cry because it's just so hard to understand why our society has been like that, and to some degree still continues to be like that. But I'm going to stop talking about that. I want to talk about the two of you. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Let me add one point. Brenda mentioned that she didn't really have people calling her names. I got lucky. people didn't doubt my ability because of an undeserved reputation, very undeserved. 1 month after I joined the Chambers Law Firm, and I'm less than a year out of law school, because I worked at the Legal Defense Fund for the first 10 months, Fergie asked me to go with him as he was trying a capital case. Our clients were charged with kidnapping and rape, which carried the death penalty sentence. You don't have to worry. Fergie was a trial lawyer. I used to say I was riding shotgun, but it wasn't even that good. I was just sitting on top of the stage, just to look. We got to Jacksonville the day before trial, and Fergie called a couple of his friends to say, "Tell me about Judge Fountain, the trial judge." He said, "Well, first, what's your man charged with?" And Fergie said, "Well, rape and kidnap." He said, "Doesn't matter. Your man's a goner. If he's charged with rape and kidnap a white woman, your man's a goner." He called the next lawyer who said the same thing. The third lawyer said the same thing, but then he added, he said, "But Judge Fountain is an evidence expert. He's been on the bench for a long time. He takes copious notes with his head down. But when anything objectionable is said, his pen comes up and his right ear pops up because he's waiting for an objection." So what do you think my job was during the course of that trial? Actually, it was to kick Fergie's foot whenever the judge's ear popped up, although Fergie knew evidence. And the first time the ear popped up, I tried to kick Fergie's foot and missed it, and Fergie didn't say anything. He may have decided to withhold the objection for strategic reasons, but since he didn't say anything, I objected. "Objection, Your Honor." Sustained. And a couple more times I was, "Objection, Your Honor." Sustained. He didn't even look at the sustained. And by about the 5th or 6th time, I got real bold. "Objection, Your Honor." Sustained. So help me, Rochelle. If that judge had asked me why I was objecting, I would have soiled my pants. I had no earthly idea why I was objecting, except his ear was popping up, and he must have known something objectionable was said. That judge left that trial, I am told, went around when the Superior Court judges would meet, talking about, because again, I was listening to Yale Law School, that long, tall, black, big afro, shaggy beard, the lawyer from Duke. So that boy sure knows some evidence. So I got the reputation after my first time ever in front of a jury in Superior Court. Had never even seen a jury trial before that trial, as an evidence expert. And during my entire legal career after that, except for the time I was on the bench as a judge, lawyers would call me from time to time saying, "Becton, I got this tough evidence question. Can you help me?" I said, "Well, I'm busy right now. I'll call you back in a couple of minutes." And I'd hang up and I'd call either Ken Brown or Don Beskin or some evidence expert, ask them the question, get the answer, call the lawyer back. And they said, "Boy, you sure know some evidence."
I love
An
it.
undeserved reputation, but from less than a year out, I'm known as a competent, skilled lawyer. And so people didn't really doubt my abilities.
As I've said earlier, you both are brilliant, so I don't think we need any more evidence. We see it every single day that you both are brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people. I want to ask you a question. There's a course that's taught in most law schools called critical race theory. What is critical race theory, and why does it matter to all law students, but specifically Black and brown law students?
I'm not sure I can define it or talk about it technically, but critical race theory is critical in exposing racism, white privilege. I actually taught a course at Central as the Charles Hamilton Houston chair professor of law called Race Relations and Discrimination in the Criminal Justice System. That did not involve typical critical race law issues, but I had some familiarity with it. One of the textbooks I used was one by Derek Brown, who may have been one of the people who started really thinking critically about critical race theories. I know Trina does that at Duke, or has done that at Duke. I know other people have done it. But except for exposing white racism and the subtle ways in which it works, I don't know that I have a better handle on it than that.
Well, I will tell you, when you taught critical race theory at Duke Law, your Black law students would always tell me what a phenomenal course and instructor you were. They left. I'm sorry?
I did not teach critical race theory there. I taught trial skills and I taught rhetoric and advocacy.
Yeah, that's what rhetoric. But
yeah, rhetoric and advocacy, yeah.
And I would always hear how well, you know, what they got from it. Not, I did not hear from that from very many white students, but Black students were always impressed with what you.
Well, you know, I've had guardian angels and GA and GL, good luck, and great mentors, GM, throughout my life. 2 years after, no, actually, this was 1974, about 4 years out of law school, when Fergie couldn't go to Colorado to teach in a National Institute for Trial Advocacy course to teach and demonstrate and critique lawyers, he asked me to go. And I didn't say Fergie, but I've never critiqued the lawyers before. I've never demonstrated trial skills before. On 2 days' notice, I went to Colorado. And because of my experience with Herendine, I worked harder than any lawyer there. And I was paired against giants from big firms who'd never lost a case before. And outshone them in all of the demonstrations and critiques. So much so that thereafter I was invited to teach at trial advocacy institutes all across the country. I became a part of their speakers bureau, and everybody wanted I got invitations almost everywhere. In fact, since that time, I have taught trial skills to over 40,000 lawyers all across the country, in fact, in 31 states when I last counted, all across Canada, from Nova Scotia to Vancouver, British Vancouver, all across South Africa. I actually was invited to teach a graduate course in litigation at Nottingham Law School in England, but the week I was supposed to travel to England, I had emergency back surgery and did not do it. So I got lucky because Fergie couldn't go, and got a reputation from that very first Advocacy Institute of being a great teacher. And of course, I just worked hard and did what I needed to do to become the best trial advocacy teacher. I told you about the Bob Herendine experience, in which I read for 6 hours. There was another law school experience that actually happened to someone else, but I actually claim it happened to me. So let me put it in the first person. When I came to Duke as a 1L, Butch Kegler went to Harvard as a 1L. And we told each other we're going to call each other after the first day of class to just compare experiences. Of course, after I went home, after reading 6 hours, I called Butch up after the first day of class and said, Butch, you can't believe what happened, man. They had the homework up three days before classes started. I read for 6 straight hours. I was ready for bear. He says, I'm going home, man. I said, going home? You ain't been to class for 1 day? He said, yeah, I walked into class. I had the same experience. I read those cases 3 days ahead of time. I went in the classroom, loaded for bear. I sat right on the front row, even though my last name is Kayla, right in front of the professor, because I knew that stuff and I was ready for bear. He says, as I was sitting there, some fellow walked up beside me, some white fellow sat down and said, hey man, my name's is Swartz. He said, hey Swartz, my name is Butch Kegler. He said, Swartz looked over and said, oh, is that the textbook? We said, he started laughing and said, you don't have the textbook? And the assignment's been up for 3 days. And Swartz said, oh, I just flew in from Europe and I haven't seen anything about any assignment. Just then the professor walked up to the podium, said, class, the assignment has been up for 3 days. I have 3 questions on that first case. I asked her 3 questions and went down his roll list and said, Swartz, what's the answer to those questions? Butch said, Swartz grabbed his text, because we're sitting next to him, and started turning pages and coughing. Said, cough 3 times, read that case and answered the questions. We said, I got up and walked out of the classroom. I said, I ain't got no business here. I said, well, Butch, if it takes Swartz 3 coughs, or if it takes you 3 hours to do what Swartz can do in 3 coughs, then you just got to do 3 hours of reading.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, Butch's mother convinced him to stay at Harvard, and he finished and actually joined me at the Legal Defense Fund my first year. Very successful lawyer in Boston. And the point is, and that this certainly was my case, almost everybody in my class was a lot smarter than I, but few of them, and during my legal career, I can say few lawyers have outworked me. In fact, I can only recount about 2 cases in my entire 50-year legal career in which I thought the lawyer on the other side outworked me. Not individually, because they always had 5 associates helping them out and that sort of thing, or the prosecutor's office helping them out, or the attorney general's office helping them out. And so I just outworked people. And so what measure of success I have achieved has been as much because of hard work as anything else.
Well, again, like I said, my experience with you and Brenda are just, it's beyond anything I see in other people, you know, and you know, I know a lot of judges and I know a lot of legal folks, and, you know, every time I come into a situation, my first thought is always, can I call Brenda and Charles first? What is,
Thank you.
You know,
well, it's preparation and reputation that garners that respect, so much so that I was told by Howard Twiggs, who at the time was president of the American Trial Lawyers Association, that, and at the time, this was in 1995, when I had won 3 National Trial Advocacy Teaching Awards. Remember, I was on the Speakers Bureau. Howard used to go around saying, Becton's won 3 out of the 4 National Trial Advocacy Teaching Awards, and no other lawyer has won more than 1. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but Howard was that type of fellow, and friends will say those things about you. So I've been teaching, as I say, to more than 40,000 students, and have garnered a reputation for being able to teach trial skills and rhetoric and advocacy.
Absolutely. So I'm going to change the subject, and we're going to talk about something a little lighter. So the mansion in which the 2 of you live in is an art museum. And I'd like you to talk to us about how you began collecting art, and what does the art, the actual collection of art, mean to the 2 of you?
I bought my first piece of art as an undergraduate at Duke, and it was a picture actually that I still have. It was the picture of a Black woman with a turban on, and probably paid $1 for it, don't know. But it spoke to me, and that's what art does. I mean, what we buy is something that has spoken to us. And I just like, I mean, sometimes it's the story behind the art or the artist itself that triggers the emotions, but it's just a way of expressing. I mean, the art is all of or about Black people, Black experiences, unless it's an abstract piece. But even the abstracts are by Black artists. Yeah. So it's just, you know, something that speaks to my heart. I assume it does Becton's. We've never disagreed about a purchase at this point. So it's just something that it gives me pleasure to be able to look at, experience it, think about the artist who did it, and or the experience that it depicts, or the beauty of Blackness, and those kinds of things.
It's our hobby. We've been doing this for close to 40 years. We have similar tastes. She can buy a piece and I will love it. I can buy a piece and she will love it. Uh, and we were able to do so because, as I said, I used to go all around the country speaking and internationally speaking. And when I would go, um, I'd treat that as a vacation. I'd get there a day ahead of the scheduled speech, stay a day later. And Brenda and I would spend our time not in fancy restaurants, not in clubs, nightclubs, not in the entertainment field, but in the art district. We would tour the art district, find local artists, and sometimes pieces that were in art galleries. And we have pieces from, again, all over the world. I spent time in South Africa in 88 and 89 during apartheid. And Brenda and I went back again in 99 and 2009 too. But on each trip, we collected a bunch of African art. But we've also done so all across Canada and all across this country. In fact, you see behind Brenda now, 2 wood carvings that we got in Victoria when we were in Canada many, many years ago. Art, like music, is just something we take pleasure in. There was a time when you couldn't come in our house without hearing music. Regrettably, we don't play that much these days, but we still have our art to look at. We probably have over
You have a lot.
200 paintings. We probably have over 500 pieces of art that include sculptures and busts and even small carvings.
If you're blessed enough to be invited to your house, it is an absolute phenomenal experience. I mean, the art and the different types of art and the place, even the placement of where you put your art speaks to both of you and your creative talents. It's just absolutely amazing. And I can't wait till you leave it all to me, you know, but, but it is.
You ever heard of sibling rivalry? We do have
well,
natural kids in addition to you.
I'm the 4th child. You can leave me the cheap stuff, you know. So you can just leave me the cheap. I'm just kidding. But it is a phenomenal collection of art, and I think again it speaks to the character of both of you. It's just really, really phenomenal. And I call your house a mansion because, you know, I've never seen. Let me take it back. I have never seen anything like that, white, black, or anywhere else, except for when I go to your house. When I go to your house, not only do I know I'm going to get something good to eat, but I am going to see things that please my eyes, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I will say one thing that is really noticeable is the pictures of your parents. When you go in your house, those things, they tell a story just by looking at them, you know, and that's really a powerful thing. I don't invite any of you to go to the Becton's house because that's my house. So don't y'all ever, you know, try to go over there. but it is a powerful experience. So I want
to clarify that it is the art that makes it a mansion. We've actually been in this house about 37 years now. It was a great architectural piece when it was built. Modern houses have larger bedrooms, larger bathrooms, and larger closets and things like that. But it's a very comfortable house, and it is the art that makes it work. Actually, since you were last here, we have completed a family tree, a pictorial family tree, going back to the early 1800s with great-great-great-grandparents, and bring pictorial family tree on a wall in the basement. You have not seen that yet.
Yeah, I want to have to come and see that too. I also want to talk a little bit about the writing your night. So not your legal writing and all that stuff, but some of your poems and some of the things that you have written. And Brenda, I don't know if you do this as well, but some of the things I have read that Becton has written has been absolutely mind-numbing because it's so phenomenal. You know, it's just really, really amazing things. Can you talk about why you started to do that and what joy it brings you?
It actually started after I finished my last exam at Howard. we had a week before graduation, and I just sat on campus under the capitol tree and just started writing. I wrote while I was in law school at Duke. Put it down for a while, but every now and then would pick it up. I enjoy writing. I consider myself a much better wordsmith than poet. I like the flow of words and the way they fit in and the music they make. Some of it is poetic, some of it is what they call poetic or something like that, which is bad poetry. But a lot of the prose writings I try to turn into poems, and I enjoy writing. And in fact, since March, I must have written 30, 35 poems, a lot on the socio-political climate, a lot on COVID-19, a lot on the political administration. But I write about love, I write about passion, I write about nature, animals, I write about human nature. Fascinating human nature is. I write about a section called Shanty Towns, about the ghetto and where people live. I have a section called Protest, in which I have protest poetry from riots and what's happening in our communities and Black Lives Matter. And I have a section called Epic Journey, in which I have a 40-page poem on professional basketball and another 20-page poem on jazz, some longer poems. I actually have a much longer poem that I wrote in maybe 20 years ago about my high school, putting everything that happened that I can recall in a poem about my high school. It is something I enjoy doing. As I mentioned, I enjoyed writing when I was on the court. I enjoyed the analysis.
Brenda, do you write as well?
Better poetry than I write.
I can only do poetry when I'm depressed. Unfortunately, I haven't been depressed.
In 50 years.
I love it.
Oh, but before we got married, she wrote some poetry. I still have some of it.
Some love letters y'all wrote to each other, you know, some of those deep, passionate letters of your impact on each other.
Actually, these were when she said she was depressed. So they weren't love letters. They were expressions of love.
Yeah, I don't get the pleasure out of writing that Becton does. Even though
She just reads. I don't read.
I like to read, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
And writing to me is kind of torturous. So I don't follow that path.
And by the way, our youngest daughter is a better poet than either of us, but she doesn't write anymore either. She hadn't written since high school, I don't think.
Absolutely. Did you all see that the National Youth Poet Laureate is a young Black woman?
Yes.
Yeah. I saw her
on a YouTube
reading
clip.
one of her poems somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. So I'm done with all of my questions. We have about 10 minutes, so I'm leaving the time to you to say anything you wish to say or anything we didn't cover or whatever you wish to do. I thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. And I would say, just in my opinion, you all need to tell the story in a much larger space, because I think that, like, you know, the griots and all those other things, these stories are phenomenal. They're our history. They're things that we've experienced. So my chats are to help people learn how to adjust and live in a world where we are not always seen as equal. But I think both of your experiences are much larger than anything I could do. So thank you both for this.
Well, thank you for asking us.
Yes.
It's not often that I sit down to reflect. So it's, and I certainly don't sit down and prepare like Becton does. I think he went through all his notes from way back when to try to see what was what. But it's good to sit back and reflect on the life that we've had. I mean, we've been fortunate. Some of it due to luck, some of it due to hard work. But I mean, 50 years is a long time, and we are fortunate that we have been able to form a life and to make an impact. I think I haven't actually myself worked in about 20 years, but I do remember that one of the pleasures that I had from the work that I did was realizing that what you do can impact other people's lives. And if you can do it so that it's a positive impact, it makes a big difference.
So
I don't have her memory, so I do have notes. I write all the time, and I've written some of this stuff down, I mean, from many, many years ago. So I pulled it up just to look at it to refresh my recollection. If I could recall like she does, I would not have had to do that.
You would have done it anyway because you always over prepare for everything that you do.
I do.
that's why he's so successful.
Thank you again. Go ahead. You have a question?
No, so I want to say something, so when I talk to people about marriage and marriage is hard, it's hard. It's a journey that, ebbs and flows. I use the two of you as my example of a perfect marriage. And I'm sure, I don't know all the ins and outs, but the way the two of you love and support each other is just an example of pure, perfected Black love. And I do claim you as my parents, but I am just so pleased that I'm a part of your lives. I learned so much from spending time with you. I love to come to your house and sit and beg for food, but just knowing that what you two put together is beyond anything I've ever seen in any other married couple. I mean, you're each other's support, you're each other's eyes, ears, everything, and that is perfect. And I do want to make this one recommendation, Becton, that you need to hire Brenda as an IT consultant and pay her for that work alone. So when you have technical problems, she's there. Now, I realize that's a part of being married, but I do think that she does have a side job as an IT consultant.
Actually, she does that. Otherwise, I'd be calling you every other day.
Well,
And by the way, thank you for your portrait piece, your love bit. We've been fortunate that we've been married 50 years, and we've never had an argument about anything.
And that is God's blessing.
I live the sticker that we used to have on our refrigerator when our kids were young. It said, there are two rules around here. Rule number one, mommy is always right.
Amen.
Rule number two, when mama is wrong, remember rule number one.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, my kids took heed, and I have always lived by that. So,
what is the old saying? Happy life, happy wife.
Yep. Happy wife, happy life. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you both for this. As soon as the video converts, I will send you a link to it. Please listen to it and let me know if I can post it. And you still have my room, so I can move in, in case I need a place.
You're always welcome.
You're always welcome.
I love you both so much. I love you more than you know, and I am always here for you. Whatever you need, just pick up the phone or call or whatever, and I am here. I am here, and I cannot tell you how much I feel blessed by God to have the two of you in my life. I just cannot tell you. Brenda, I remember you helped me write my dissertation. I mean, like, I didn't know how to spell dissertation, and you helped me do that, which was absolutely wonderful. I can ask Becton, we've got judges coming in, the last judge dinner you all hosted. How many people? It was like 20 or 30 people that came, and you all cooked. I mean, just phenomenal, I found myself a new room in the house, the little screen porch. Many times I've been to your house, I'd never been there, so I found a new space to be. you people are exceptional, and you are blessings from God, and God has blessed you, and I am glad to be a part of your life. So thank you so much.
Our art is not our only hobby. Cooking is a hobby.
I already said how many times I come on there and beg for food, Excellent cooking, I mean, like biscuits, I don't think anybody, not even Bojangles or whoever the other biscuit people can touch your biscuits. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal, so let me know when I can come eat again.
Just give us a call.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll send you a link very shortly.
All right.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Same to you.
Absolutely.